When caring becomes too much. Part 1. This story is from the point of view of Lily, a caregiver who is taking care of her chronically ill mother. The first time I realized I was tired of taking care of my mother, I felt like the worst daughter in the world. It wasn't because I didn't love her. I did. And that was the problem. I loved her so much that I had slowly convinced myself that being exhausted didn't matter. I convinced myself that being angry most times didn't matter. That crying in the bathroom with the shower running didn't matter. All the things happening to me did not matter because I was not sick, she was the one who was sick. It didn't matter that I was tired physically and mentally. I was supposed to be the healthy, strong one. My name is Lily, and I was 29 when caregiving became my entire identity. Before that, I had a job I loved. I had friends and I went out on Friday nights. I had a boyfriend who complained that I worked too much. I had plans. Real plans. I was going to travel and meet new people. I was going to get new experiences that will last me a lifetime. Maybe I would buy a little house someday. Maybe I would get married. Maybe have children. Or maybe not. I didn't know. But I had all those plans. Because I was young enough to believe that I had time to figure out everything I had planned out. However, my mother got sick. It started quietly. A doctor's appointment. Then another. Then tests were ordered. Then more tests. Eventually there were medications. Followed by specialist appointments. Then there were phone calls with insurance companies. Then so many forms to fill and file away. There were days when my mother couldn't get out of bed. And somewhere between the first diagnosis and the third medication change, I stopped being her daughter and became her caregiver. Nobody announced it. There was no conversation. There was no ceremony. It just happened. My brother lived 3 hours away and had a demanding job. My father had been dead for years. So everyone looked at me expectantly. Lily can handle it. That's what they all said. And at first I was proud that they all assumed that I was capable. I thought yes, I could handle it. After all, she is my mother and I just needed to take care of her. So I learned her different medications, their dosage and possible side effects. I kept track of which symptoms were new and which ones were not. I learned to listen for changes in her breathing when she slept. I organized her appointments. I cooked all her meals and I cleaned. I amended my daily schedule to be free to drive her anywhere. I learned which foods she could tolerate and which ones to avoid cooking. I learned the sound of her footsteps when she was having a bad day. I became an expert in my mother's illness. But somewhere along the way I stopped being an expert in myself. I stopped knowing when I was hungry. I stopped noticing when I was tired. I stopped answering text messages on time. My friends would text. Where have you been? Are you okay? Do you want to come out this weekend? And I would always reply with the same thing. Sorry. Things are just crazy right now. Crazy became my favorite word. It seemed to explain everything happening with me. It explained why I couldn't meet with friends. Why I was late for appointments. Why I hadn't showered in a day. Why I couldn't concentrate at work. Why I forgot someone's birthday. Why I hadn't laughed in weeks. Things were just crazy. Because it was easier to say things were crazy than, I'm not okay. Because I didn't think I was allowed to be not okay. After all, my mother was the one suffering. I was just helping. That was what always came to my mind whenever my body tells me that I'm not doing well. The first warning sign that I was not okay was my sleep. I couldn't remember the last time I had slept through the night. Even when my mother was sleeping peacefully, I would wake up every few hours. I'd just lie there in the darkness listening. Was she breathing? Did she need something? Had I forgotten a medication? Was tomorrow's appointment at 9 or 10? Did we have enough groceries? What if something happened while I was asleep? And at dawn, my body will already be tired and exhausted. Unfortunately, my brain would never take a break from being alert. So I could never really relax or sleep deeply. I always felt I didn't sleep enough. But I would continue to forge ahead. I later learned that caregivers generally can experience something called hypervigilance. It means your nervous system becomes constantly on alert for danger. You're always watching out for something. You're always listening for something. You're always anticipating the next problem. At that time, I didn't know there was a name for what was happening to me. I thought I was just being responsible by always being alert. One night, around 3 in the morning, I heard my mother cough. I jumped out of bed so quickly that I hit my knee against the nightstand. I ran down the hallway. "Mom," I called out. She was sitting up. "I'm okay," she whispered. I stood there breathing heavily. She looked at me. "Lily, you can go back to bed." "No, I'm fine," I replied. "But you look exhausted." "I'm fine," I insisted. She smiled sadly, saying, "You always say that." I smiled back sadly, but said nothing. She did not say anything else because neither of us believed my words. My mother began needing more help, and I began needing more patience, except I was running out of both. Sometimes she would ask me the same question 3 or 4 times. Most times I would answer gently, but by the 5th time my voice would change. "Mom, I already told you," I would reply without thinking. Then I'd see her face, and immediately I would feel guilty. "I'm sorry." "It's okay," she will say. "No, I'm really sorry." "It's okay, Lily," she will insist. But it wasn't okay, because every apology made me feel like I was failing her. And every moment I felt irritated made me hate myself. I began experiencing something I had never heard of before. Caregiver guilt. It was that strange kind of guilt that makes you feel ashamed for having normal human emotions. I felt guilty when I was angry. Guilty when I wanted privacy. I felt guilty when I wished someone else would take over and give me a break. I felt guilty when I went out with my friends. I even felt guilty when I laughed. Once, I spent an entire afternoon at a friend's birthday party. For 3 hours, I forgot about medications, appointments, doctors, bills. I forgot about my mother's illness. At the party, I laughed so hard that my stomach hurt. And for a few minutes, I actually felt like my old self again. Then I looked at my phone. There was a message from my mother. "Are you coming home soon?" My happiness disappeared immediately. I left the party early. On the drive home, I cried in the car. Not because I wanted to go home, but because I was terrified that I didn't want to return home. My boyfriend was the first person to say it out loud. "You can't keep doing this." We were sitting in his car outside my mother's house. I had just finished dropping off groceries. "I don't have a choice," I told him. "You do," he replied. "No, I don't." "You haven't taken a full day off for yourself in months," he stated. "My mother needs me." "And who else needs you?" I stared at him. "What kind of question is that?" I asked. "An important one." I looked away. Shaking his head, he stated sadly, "Lily, you're disappearing." Those words have stayed with me ever since then. You're disappearing. First, I was offended. Then I realized that he was right, because I had stopped doing the things that made me feel like myself. I didn't read anymore. I didn't exercise like I used to. I almost never saw my friends. I barely cooked for myself. I wore the same outfits over and over again. My apartment looked like a storage room. There were unopened packages everywhere. Laundry sat in baskets for days. My work performance was slipping. I was forgetting things. Small things at first, then important things. I once missed a meeting with my manager because I had completely forgotten it existed. Another day, I drove to the grocery store and couldn't remember why I was there. I sat in the parking lot for almost 10 minutes. Then I started crying. I wasn't sad. I just felt empty. And that scared me more than the crying. Eventually, my doctor used another word during my session. Burnout. Not laziness. Not selfishness. Not weakness. Just burnout. It was the zero emotional and physical exhaustion that can happen when prolonged stress keeps demanding more from you than you have left to give. She had asked me how often I rested. I scoffed, then laughed. But she didn't. She just stared at me with a straight face. And her look sobered me up immediately. Then she asked, "How often do you do something just for yourself?" I looked at the floor and answered, "I don't know." "It's okay," she said. Then she asked gently, "How often do you see your friends?" "I don't know." "All right, how often do you sleep through the night?" she continued. I almost laughed again, but instead I started crying. My doctor handed me a tissue, and suddenly I couldn't stop. I cried for 20 minutes, maybe 30. I cried because I was tired. I cried because I was angry. I cried because I loved my mother. I cried because sometimes I wanted to run away. And most of all, I cried because I thought that having those feelings made me a bad daughter. Then my doctor told me something profound. She said, "You can love someone deeply and still be exhausted by caring for them." That sentence touched me deeply, because when people around me talked about my love for my mother, they talked about love as being sacrifice, family, responsibility. Nobody talked about exhaustion. Nobody talked about loneliness. Nobody talked about the sadness and grief that comes from watching someone you love so much change while you're still trying to hold on to who they used to be. Nobody talked about how caregiving for your loved one can make you grieve a life you haven't even lost yet. That night, I went home and sat beside my mother. She was watching television. I looked at her hands. They were smaller than I remembered. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held her cup. I reached over and took her hand. She looked at me. "You've been quiet." "I'm tired." She nodded and said, "I know." I swallowed and started, "Mom?" "Yes. Sometimes I'm too tired to do this anymore." She didn't respond immediately. My heart began pounding. I thought she would be hurt. I thought she would tell me I was selfish. Instead, she squeezed my hand. "I know." I looked at her. "You know." She nodded. "Lily, I've watched you become tired." I started crying. She pulled me close to her chest. "I'm your mother," she whispered. "I know when you're pretending to be okay." I buried my face against her shoulder. And for the first time in over a year, I let myself be the one who needed comforting. I thought that conversation would change everything. But it didn't, not immediately. My mother was still sick. I was still her caregiver. There were still medications, appointments, bills, bad days, sleepless nights. But something inside me had changed. I had finally admitted the truth. That I was tired. And being tired didn't mean I didn't love her. It meant I was human, with feelings. But there was something neither of us knew yet. My mother's condition was about to take a turn. And the little bit of strength I had left was going to be tested in ways I wasn't prepared for. Because caregiving fatigue does not always arrive suddenly or all at the same time. Sometimes, it arrives quietly. One missed meal. One sleepless night. One canceled plan. One swallowed emotion. One more time saying, "I'm fine." Until one day, you realize that you don't recognize yourself anymore. And I was about to find out just how far a person can disappear, while still showing up every single day. This is the end of part 1. Part 2 will be posted next week. Please subscribe to receive notification of part 2.